Welcome to Full Circle. I'm Suzanne McAllister. I'm so glad you could be with us today. Well, coming up in our music segment, we have an incredibly talented pianist. Her name is Claire Longendijk, so be sure and stay with us for that. First, it is my absolute privilege to introduce Josh Blyle. He is a former Marine corporal, and he is also the spokesperson for the Indianapolis Colts. Welcome to Full Circle.
Thank you for having me.
I'm really glad you're here. Josh, as a former Marine, I know that October 5th, 2006 will forever be locked into your brain. That was when you had your accident where you lost your legs. But before we talk about that, let's go back to the time. You were 27 years old when you enlisted in the Marines. What was your life like before you went into the Marines?
It was good. I was working and had a good, steady job. I had gotten out of Purdue and had been in the workforce for a while. Had my own place and just going about everything happened. And then when September 11th happened to this country, it obviously changed so many things, but something was set off inside of me of just that I was an able-bodied kid. I was an athlete. Had played sports growing up and in college, and I had family. My father was a Marine. My grandfather was in the Army, and just believed in that there was a purpose that God was kind of putting on my heart, that He would get me through this. And I said, I can do it. And so I decided that after 9/11, even though life was grand and going well, that this is just where I was being called.
So you were called to the Marines. What was boot camp like? It had to have been a grueling situation.
It's miserable. It really is. It's 13 weeks of just breaking you down and building you up, and being 27 with 17 and 18-year-olds was a process in its own. It was really a challenge for me, thinking that I was 27 and was a lot more mature and this, and had to put it into reality that these guys were there for the same reason, and we had to learn to work together and get through things, and everybody was going through the same miserable 13 weeks. But it was a blessing, and realizing that the drill instructors, as horrible as we thought they were preparing us. They knew
Sure.
They wanted us to be physically and mentally ready.
Sure. So tell me then the transition. You were called to, was it Fallujah initially?
Yes. Did the Marine Corps boot camp, infantry school, joined as a reserved. So I was going back and forth, and then got called up to go over to Fallujah in 2006.
So what was that like? You got there, you're a kid from Indiana, and boom, you're in a whole different world.
Yeah, when you're crossing those lines, it's, you have your rifle. It's at all times you have, all your gear on, and it's a combat zone. And you're hearing gunfire, and you're just, I was taken out of my element. As much as I trained and prepared, it's just something else once you get there. You don't know what to expect, but it was definitely, you're surrounded by those guys you've trained with and lived with, and these are your friends, and that's kind of the comfort. But you also, that whole knowing that this is where I was called, and this is what I got to do, and trusting in that strength was going to see me through. And that's what really calmed my nerves about the whole thing, was just understanding that it'd be all right. But yeah, it's a different world.
Sure. But on that day, October 5th of 2006, you say it was one bad day. Tell me about being in that Humvee.
We were doing patrols, so we were stopping vehicles. It was a routine thing that we do. We have specific, interests that we're looking at, and pulling guys over and looking through their stuff, and we're looking for the bad guys and the intel and the weapons, and done a few stops and loaded back up, and just did a quick U-turn to turn around to go meet up with two other Humvees. And that's when the explosion went off, and my world went black at that moment. I was knocked out from the impact of the explosion underneath me, and our SAPI plates came up and broke my jaw, and woke up 5 days later.
And you woke up in the hospital, right?
Yep, Landstuhl, Germany.
So at what point did they tell you that they had to amputate your legs, or had they already amputated your legs?
They had already amputated my legs at that point. Unfortunately, the shrapnel of the bottom of the vehicle had damaged them so badly that there was no saving. So they had amputated, and then actually my gunner, who was injured with me, he had lost his right leg, and for me, on the plane ride home, that we had lost two of our guys.
And they were there in the Humvee with you?
Yeah.
So when you think back on that day, many years later,
Right.
what thoughts do you have now?
You know, it's still hard. That's the hardest thing. I can see, you know, where my path has gone and my injuries, and there, you know, there was a bigger plan. But it's still hard to lose friends. Those are brothers, you know, that I had, you know, trained with and loved. And just, you know, my sergeant was killed and my roommate was killed. So it's just, there was anger at that time and a lot of anger of my situation and that and understanding, you know, I know that they're in a better place, you know, but dealing with their families, how hard it was on their loss and their hearts. Was a big issue, but looking back, you know, I think of those guys daily.
Yeah, no doubt. But your faith, it sounds like, and your courage has really helped you through this period of transition.
Oh, absolutely. That's been, you know, my biggest strength has gotten me through it. It was my faith. It is my faith that it was tested by far. I was angry. I didn't understand and got kind of stuck in the moment of why did God allow this to happen? And I thought I'd prayed about this is where I was called, and you know, and then this is I didn't get it. Looking back at it now, this October will be 9 years. He has bigger plans. He has much bigger plans for, you know, for what we are going to do, and it's turned out well.
And here you are with the Indianapolis
Right,
Colts.
yeah, not a bad gig.
So much has happened to you. We need to take a break, but Josh has authored the book that's called One Step at a Time. There's also a DVD called Faith, Courage, and Football. And it's a really interesting story how our guest today, Josh Bleiel, ended up one step at a time with the Indianapolis Colts. Stay with us, and we'll tell you that story after this. Welcome back to Full Circle. We're continuing our conversation with former Marine Corporal Josh Bleiel. He is the author of the book One Step at a Time, and he's also the spokesperson for the Indianapolis Colts. Well, we left off by hearing about your story where you had lost your legs, you were in the hospital. Let's flash forward to this long recovery period that you had. You said you were angry. I can't blame you for being angry. How did you transition out of that?
It was really, you know, you go through the gambit of emotions and you deal with the loss of not only your friends, but the life-changing experience. But you're surrounded by men and women that went through the same thing. They had lost limbs, they had fought and lost friends, and that camaraderie and just it becomes your team and you're cheering for one another. And there were just a lot of opportunities that were opening up, a lot of, you know, doors opening and getting to do things and showing that life was going to continue.
But at first, I understand you didn't want to leave the hospital. You didn't want anyone to see you. You felt that it would be very difficult for you to just move on.
Right.
But there was something about some Super Bowl tickets that kind of got you excited?
Yeah, that's something that really got me out of the hospital. The first opportunity that I ever left was to go to see the Indianapolis Colts play the Chicago Bears down in Miami. And they took 20 of us injured Marines, and we got to go. And from Indy, you know, being an Indy kid growing up, it was a dream come true, especially, you know, since we won that championship.
So between the time that you went to the Super Bowl, though, and that recovery period, let's talk about when you got your first set of legs. I understand they're just maybe 4 feet tall?
Yeah, that's correct. They're just pylons to learn how to balance like stilts, and you know, you just kind of stand there for a while, just getting your balance, and then over a couple of days, you start taking those first steps, and it's awkward, and it's things you don't think about. You have to learn to fall and stand up, but you're surrounded by other guys that have done it, and so they're kind of trying to give you tips here and there. But it became a path, knowing that, you know, I was going to do this again, and I was going to walk.
So you were ready to go home, you know, after this long almost 2 year process,
Correct.
right?
Yes.
But then there was a setback. You got an infection. Tell me about that.
I did. They found 2 infections in my legs and went in and tried to refit me, and it was causing issues with my prosthetics. And I just couldn't bear the pain anymore, so they went in and re-amputated, cut out the infection, and then started almost the process all over. So that was during that 2 years, about after 10 months of why it continued to be the entire 2 years.
Sure. So let's talk about your legs.
Yes,
I know
yeah.
you'd like to do that. So how are you able to maneuver. I mean, you're very agile.
Yeah, the technology has come so far. These legs are, some of the newest. They have actually microprocessors in each leg that help you when you sit. They kind of slow it down, and when you stand, the knees lock out after a certain amount of time. So you're not always fighting the legs. It almost becomes a natural swing too when you start to walk. The knees bend and everything, and so it's been a blessing how far they've come. Sometimes good things come out of wars and that sort of thing, but that's definitely been one of them.
One of the things I keep hearing you say is it's a blessing. Life goes on. You had a support team, but for many Marines or other people that have served in this country, they have not been able to move on. Perhaps they're suffering from post-traumatic stress syndrome. What advice do you have for people that are in that situation and they are not taking that one step at a time that you have so successfully done?
Well, and it is. There's so many guys and gals that go through that for what they're asked to do and have to do. And I understand it. It's getting through those emotions and seeing what is ahead. But really, the biggest thing is having that support team. But also sometimes it's getting together. We don't talk about it unless we're with other Marines, fellow guys, and sometimes when we get out of that element, we get lost and I keep in regular contact with my Marines because we need that. We need to bond about guys who have done it as well.
Sure, you have that common experience. So what about family members that maybe realize that their loved one is withdrawn and is not the same? Because how can you be the same when you come back from a war situation? Any advice for family members?
I just think it's you can't push them as much. I mean, but they have gone through a life-changing event, and they are the same person in a way, but it is, I think they do just want to be treated the same almost. I know that sounds almost contradictory, but at the same time, I was so worried that people would treat me different for what I'd done and where we had been. But I just wanted them to see me as the same old goofball that I'd always been, and I think once they started to see that, and they didn't feel nervous about talking about it or stuff, it made me more at ease, definitely.
Good advice. Thanks for sharing that. Well, we're going to take a commercial break, but I want to let our audience know that you can go to our website, fullcircleshow.net. We'll have a link to Josh Bleiel, and you can find out more about his book, One Step at a Time. It's very inspirational. I highly recommend that you go to our website. And when we come back with Josh, we're also going to find out about his DVD, Faith, Courage, and the NFL. Don't go away. Well, we are back in this segment of our program. We're going to talk about faith, courage, and football with our guest, Josh Bleiel. Josh, you have an incredible story, and it's amazing that your positive attitude is just infectious. You are an inspiration to so many people, and I really admire your strength.
Thank you.
So, faith, courage, and football. Let's talk about how, earlier you talked about how, you got the Super Bowl tickets and it really kind of revved you up and got you going. But how did that come about? And then tell us about how you ended up working for the Indianapolis Colts.
Yeah, after the opportunity of the Super Bowl and the Colts winning it, they went out to meet President Bush after that point, but the team stopped by Walter Reed, where I was recovering, to see the men and women who had served and been injured. And a lot of teams and people do that, but it was just, for me, it was special because that was, my hometown team. But Mr. Irsay, the owner, knew I was from Indianapolis. We had a mutual friend who had kept him up to date on me, and he found me. He made it a point to find me and offer me, two things. He said, anytime you want to fly home, I'll fly you home, and when you get there, come see me about a job.
And you obviously took him
up on the offer. I did, absolutely.
All right.
Yeah.
So now you're hanging out with the football guys.
Yeah, just finished my 6th season with the Colts.
Yeah.
And just purely do motivational speaking and public speaking, and love the job. And they've given me so much. The Irsay family's been great to me, and the Colts, it's a great opportunity. And I get to watch a lot of football. So.
And you get to watch a lot of football. And what person, guys especially, don't like to watch
not a
football.
Bad gig.
Well, there's also an interesting story behind this DVD, Faith, Courage, and Football. I love the title, but it really wasn't supposed to be you, but
No,
something
it
happened,
wasn't.
right?
Yeah, it was. You know, the Colts like to do a DVD each season. With Coach Dungy, our football player. And during that time where they were getting ready to come out with the next DVD, was the NFL lockout. And you can't use players or their images or anything. So they approached me, and it's just, we talked about it's just God's timing, and allowed me to do that. And a wonderful sponsor who, we got to share about Christ and talk about it and get the DVD out.
So let's talk about your children
Yes.
and your family. They
Yes.
went through this process with you.
They did. My wife and I were dating and had dated for many years off and on. And so she went through this whole thing with me, and it was just, my strength and, tough love, but a good love, and just said I could do it. And we got married. We've been married for 6 years this April. And we have 2 beautiful children, 4. My daughter's 4, who's Allie, and my son's 2, Gunnar.
That's great. And Gunner, that's kind of a Marine term, isn't it?
It is. He's actually my gunner, Tim, who was with me and injured and lost his right leg. He was named after him because I always referred to him as my gunner. He was my machine gunner, and we call him our gunners. So he was named after Timmy.
Oh, that's really nice. A good tribute to your friend. We were talking about your legs earlier, and you're very open about wearing shorts so that people can see your legs.
Absolutely.
So I'm curious what the kids, have they had any reactions to the fact that Daddy has a little different pair of legs?
They not really. Like my daughter has always said since she's been little, she said, Daddy has boo-boos. But she's at 4, so she's a little more ornery, so she knows she can outrun me. So it's another challenge. Like she knows if I can't catch her at some point. But yeah, they just go along with it. It's their dada, and so it's just, and it's a great feeling just to get those hugs and to love on them, and there's just no.
And isn't that what it's all about? It's not about, this body of ours. It's really about our soul and our faith and that courage.
Yeah, it's a great comparison. That's how much they love. They don't see anything but that. They see me as their daddy, and it's just how our faith is. That it's not about any of that other stuff. It's just belief.
That's right. Well, we're almost out of time. I'm curious what you see next. I mean, God has placed so much goodness in your life, and you did serve our country. You are a hero to us, and thank you for your service. What final thought do you have for us today, Josh?
It's really wherever God leads us. I mean, He's got bigger plans, and sometimes you get stuck in a rut, but He gets us through it, and that strength got me where I am, and I'll continue to trust in that to see where it leads me next.
Well, we are so glad that your path led you here to Full Circle. Our guest is Josh Blyle. He's a former Marine, always a Marine. If you want to get more information about One Step at a Time or Faith, Courage, and Football, be sure and go to fullcircleshow.net and let us know what you are up to. Perhaps you might be on the show next. Thanks again, Josh.
Thank you.
Well, we're back with Claire Longendijk next.
Stay tuned. Musical Showcase is coming up next. And now, here's our Musical Showcase.
Welcome back to Full Circle. I love this portion of the program because I get to introduce to you some very talented musicians. Claire Longendijk is one such person. She is a pianist, and she's currently studying at the Indiana University Jacobs School of Music. Welcome to Full Circle.
Thank you, Suzanne.
So tell me a little bit about your training and all the experiences that you've had.
Sure. I am very proud of the fact that I've lived and studied sort of all over the world. I did my undergraduate studies in Boston at the Boston University. And since then, I've been in Paris and all across Europe, in Los Angeles for a year last year, and now in Bloomington, Indiana.
Well, that speaks to your talent. And I can't wait to hear you get back to the piano because we had you warming up and it was exquisite. Tell me the piece you're going to play.
I would love to perform the first movement of Robert Schumann's Carnival, Opus 9.
All right. Well, I'm Suzanne McAllister, and I will see you next time, Full Circle.